Segment 1. Vijay Singh and the scorecard ban. Vijay Singh's resume eventually became Hall of Fame material. 3 majors, dozens of PGA Tour victories, and a reputation as one of the hardest workers in golf. But his career almost ended before it even began. In 1985, Singh was competing at the Indonesian Open when officials ruled that his scorecard had been altered. On the Asian golf circuit, that kind of violation is treated as a major breach of integrity. He was immediately disqualified, and the Southeast Asia Golf Federation handed him an indefinite suspension. Singh has always denied any deliberate wrongdoing, saying the issue was a mistake, but the decision stood. That ruling effectively shut him out of the region's professional golf scene. With the doors to the Asian circuit closed, Singh was forced to look elsewhere to keep his career alive. He traveled to remote places, small events in Borneo, Africa, and the South Pacific, taking any opportunity he could find to earn money and keep competing. Those years became a grind of travel, modest purses, and little recognition, but they also kept him in the game. From there, he managed to rebuild his reputation in Europe. Consistent play eventually earned him his PGA Tour card, and by the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had established himself as one of the game's dominant figures. Still, the ban from 1985 never completely disappeared from his story. For critics, it remained a shadow over his integrity. For supporters, it highlighted his resilience, proof that he could fight his way back from the edge of obscurity. Singh's case is a reminder of how fragile a career can be in golf. A single ruling nearly derailed one of the most successful players of his generation, and yet it also shaped the relentless drive that defined the rest of his career. Segment 2. Doug Barron and the first PGA Tour doping suspension. In 2009, the PGA Tour's new anti-doping policy was put to the test, and the first player caught under it was Doug Barron. A journeyman pro, Barron tested positive for testosterone and a beta blocker, both banned substances under the rules. His case wasn't as simple as outright cheating. Barron had been prescribed testosterone replacement therapy after being diagnosed with very low levels, and the beta blocker was tied to a medical condition as well. But the tour's policy was clear. If it's on the banned list, it's prohibited regardless of circumstance. He was suspended for 1 year, and the decision sparked debate. Some argued Barron was unfairly punished for following medical advice, while others said the rules had to be enforced consistently to protect the integrity of competition. For Barron, the suspension was devastating. Missing a full season made it nearly impossible to rebuild momentum, and his career never fully recovered. The case set an important precedent. It showed that golf, a sport long built on tradition and self-policing, was ready to enforce doping rules as firmly as any other league. And for fans, Barron's name remains tied to the moment golf entered the era of formal anti-doping discipline. If you're loving this video, subscribe now and help us hit 5,000 golf fans by month's end. Segment 3. Dustin Johnson's mysterious absences. Dustin Johnson is one of the most talented golfers of his generation, a US Open champion, a Masters winner, and for a time, the #1 player in the world. But before he became a dominant force, his career nearly derailed over suspensions that the PGA Tour never fully explained. In 2012, Johnson announced he was stepping away from golf for a few months, citing personal reasons. 2 years later, in 2014, he did it again, this time taking an extended 6-month leave of absence. Officially, the PGA Tour maintained its long-standing policy of not disclosing disciplinary actions. Unofficially, multiple reports claimed Johnson had failed drug tests for recreational substances, and that his absence wasn't voluntary at all. The secrecy created a storm. Fans speculated, journalists dug for details, and Johnson himself kept quiet. The lack of clarity frustrated some, but it also highlighted how the PGA Tour handled sensitive cases differently than other sports. Where leagues like the NFL or NBA publicized suspensions, golf preferred to keep things in the shadows. For Johnson, those absences became turning points. He later admitted that he had gone through struggles off the course and needed to get his life back in order. After returning, he began the most consistent stretch of his career, eventually winning multiple majors and becoming the face of American golf. The impact of his case is twofold. On one hand, it showed that even superstars weren't immune from issues that could take them off tour. On the other, it exposed how golf's culture of privacy sometimes blurred the line between official suspensions and quiet discipline. Fans were left to connect the dots, and the rumors never fully went away. Johnson's story demonstrates how a player can stumble, regroup, and still reach the top, but also how the PGA Tour's handling of bans can leave as many questions as answers. Segment 4. John Daly's suspensions for conduct. John Daly's talent made him a fan favorite. His conduct kept putting him in the tour's crosshairs. The first major punishment arrived in 1993 when the PGA Tour suspended him for the rest of the season, and into 1994 for behavior issues that violated its policy. The tour didn't publish every detail, but the suspension was formal and immediate, and it set a clear line for Daly going forward. 15 years later, another headline. In October 2008, police in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, found Daly intoxicated outside a Hooters and took him to jail to sober up under a state assistance law. The photo in the orange jail suit ricocheted through sports media, and the PGA Tour responded with a 6-month suspension for conduct that brought unwelcome publicity. Daly confirmed the ban himself, calling it probably fair in perception, and Golf Digest reported the tour's action the same week. The suspension ended in late May 2009. Daly returned at the St. Jude Championship after roughly half a year away, with the tour signaling the matter was closed, but the expectations unchanged. His case became a reference point for how the PGA Tour handles off-course incidents. The discipline is real, public details are limited, and reinstatement follows if the player meets the terms. Segment 5. Betting bans. Vince India and Jake Staiano. In 2023, the PGA Tour's integrity program stopped being a warning on paper and turned into real suspension. Vince India and Jake Staiano became the first players punished for betting on golf, even though neither wagered on events they were playing in. India, a Korn Ferry Tour regular, was banned for 6 months. Staiano received 3 months after admitting to small-stake bets totaling just over $100. To them, it may have felt harmless, but the tour had stressed in education sessions that any betting on golf was off-limits. The goal wasn't just to stop match fixing, but to protect the perception of fairness in every tournament. The irony was that by 2023, the PGA Tour had official sportsbook partners, with fans encouraged to place wagers during the live broadcast. That contrast sparked debate, but the suspension sent a clear message. Players would face zero tolerance, even at the developmental level. For Staiano, the break became a reset. He later admitted it helped him refocus on qualifying and staying disciplined. India stayed quiet, but the impact was the same. Their cases marked golf's first public stand on gambling, putting the tour alongside other leagues like the NFL and NBA in drawing sharp boundaries between players and betting. Segment 6. Matt Every's marijuana suspensions. Matt Every, a 2-time PGA Tour winner, is one of the few players suspended twice for the same violation. In 2019 and again in 2020, he tested positive for marijuana, earning 3-month bans each time. Every openly admitted he had a medical prescription in Florida, but the PGA Tour follows World Anti-Doping Agency rules, which still list marijuana as banned during competition. State laws didn't matter. Under tour policy, a positive test meant suspension. After the first ban, he said plainly that he knew the rules and accepted the consequences. His case drew attention because other leagues like Major League Baseball and the NBA were starting to relax their marijuana policies. Golf held firm, leaving players like Every caught between shifting public attitudes and strict anti-doping codes. For Every, the suspensions meant more than headlines. Time away cost him ranking points, prize money, and chances at bigger events. Instead of being remembered only for his wins at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, his name also became tied to the debate over whether golf should keep penalizing marijuana use. Segment 7. Robert Garrigus and the first marijuana suspension. Before Matt Every, Robert Garrigus was the first PGA Tour player suspended for marijuana. In 2019, he tested positive and received a 3-month ban, making headlines as the tour's anti-doping program took a strict stance. Garrigus didn't deny it. He admitted he had used marijuana legally in a state where it was permitted, but legality outside the course didn't matter. The tour, following World Anti-Doping Agency guidelines, classifies marijuana under its drugs of abuse category. The suspension sparked debate. By then, several U.S. states had legalized recreational use, and sports like MLB and the NHL had softened their testing. Golf, however, enforced the rule fully. Garrigus accepted the penalty, but the case highlighted how the tour was out of step with changing cultural attitudes. The impact on his career was significant. Time away meant fewer starts, lost money, and the difficulty of rebuilding momentum in a sport where rhythm is everything. His suspension also set the precedent that later caught players like Matt Every. Garrigus may not have been a superstar, but his case became a marker in golf's complicated relationship with cannabis. Segment 8. Anthony Kim and the Vanishing Act. Anthony Kim's case is one of the strangest stories in modern golf, and it still gets talked about more than a decade later. In the late 2000s, Kim looked like the future of American golf. He had style, confidence, and results to back it up. He won 3 PGA Tour events before turning 25, finished third at the 2010 Masters, and starred for Team USA in the Ryder Cup, where his aggressive play made him an instant fan favorite. Analysts were already comparing him to Tiger Woods as the next big American superstar. Then in 2012, Kim disappeared. He walked away from the PGA Tour and never came back. There was no official suspension announced, no statement from the tour, and very little communication from Kim himself. That silence opened the door to endless theories. The most widely reported explanation centers around a massive disability insurance policy. According to Golf.com and ESPN, Kim had taken out a policy worth an estimated $10 to $20 million, which would pay out if injuries ended his career prematurely. By stepping away permanently, he preserved the payout. If he ever returned to competitive golf, he could risk losing that financial safety net. The injuries were real. Kim had battled tendon issues in his thumb, an Achilles problem, and surgeries that made it difficult to sustain the level of play required on tour. But the complete disappearance, no tournaments, no interviews, and only rare sightings at driving ranges gave his story a mysterious edge. Fans began calling him golf's lost star. The PGA Tour's silence also added to the intrigue. Unlike doping suspensions or conduct violations, where at least a statement is issued, Kim's absence came with no formal explanation. That left fans and media to piece together the story from insurance records, anonymous sources, and the occasional comment from friends or former coaches. Even now, more than 10 years later, no one has been able to give a definitive answer about whether he might return. What makes Kim's case stand out is how it blends talent, timing, and circumstance. He wasn't forced out by a public scandal, but by a mix of injuries, financial realities, and personal choice. Yet his absence had a major impact on the game. At a time when golf was searching for the next big American star, Kim's departure left a void. Players like Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth filled that space later, but many still wonder what Kim's career would have looked like if he had stayed. Today, Anthony Kim remains a cult figure. Golf forums light up whenever there's a rumor of him practicing or a blurry photo of him at a course. His story is brought up almost every Masters or Ryder Cup broadcast, usually with a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. In a sport where careers are usually defined by wins and losses, Kim is remembered for what he didn't do: come back. And that mystery has turned him into one of the most unique cases in PGA Tour history. Segment 9, Marco Penge's betting ban 2024. Marco Penge was one of England's promising young professionals, with early flashes of talent that suggested a steady future on the DP World Tour. But in late 2024, his name appeared in the headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with his golf swing. The tour announced that Penge had breached its integrity rules by placing bets on golf events, an offense taken seriously across all of professional sports. The investigation showed that the wagers weren't tied to his own rounds. He hadn't tried to influence a scorecard or gain an inside edge. Instead, he admitted to small stake bets spread across high-profile tournaments like the Majors and the Ryder Cup. But that distinction didn't matter. The rules state clearly that professionals cannot gamble on golf in any form, because even the perception of impropriety threatens the credibility of the sport. The outcome was a 3-month suspension, though 1 month was suspended based on his cooperation and early admission. He also received a fine of about £2,000 and was told that any further breach would carry harsher penalties. While the ban didn't end his career, it meant missing part of the 2024-25 season at a time when every appearance matters for ranking points, sponsors, and earnings. He became eligible to return in mid-February 2025, but the damage to his reputation was harder to put on a timeline. What makes this case stand out is how it reflects a wider cultural shift in golf. With legalized sports betting expanding worldwide, tours are under pressure to keep strict boundaries. Even casual wagers, the kind many fans make on their phones, are now career-threatening decisions for professionals. Marco Penge's case serves as a modern example of how the line between harmless fun and professional misconduct is drawn sharply in today's game. Segment 10, Wesley, Bryan, and the controversy over live golf content events. Wesley Bryan is best known as one half of the Bryan Bros, the trick shot duo that built a huge following on YouTube long before social media golf content became mainstream. He also has a PGA Tour win on his resume, the 2017 RBC Heritage, which gave him credibility as more than just an entertainer. But in 2025, Bryan's name popped up for something no one expected, a suspension tied not to his play, but to his involvement with LIV Golf. Here's what happened. In April 2025, Bryan announced that the PGA Tour had suspended him indefinitely for taking part in a LIV-backed exhibition called The Duels, held at Trump Doral in Miami. It wasn't a standard LIV tournament with huge purses and team play. It was more of a content-driven event blending pro golfers, influencers, and entertainment. But under PGA Tour rules, the line is simple. Any member who participates in an unsanctioned LIV event faces discipline, and the minimum penalty is a 1-year ban. Bryan didn't hide from the news. He explained in a candid video on the Bryan Brothers channel that he had weighed the risk and decided to go ahead because he believed the event was more about media and exposure than competition. He said he respected the PGA Tour's position, but felt the policy hadn't caught up with the way golf is evolving in the digital space. For him, the decision was about embracing a new way of reaching fans, not about defecting to LIV as a full-time player. The case is unusual because it sits at the intersection of professional golf and creator culture. Most PGA Tour bans have dealt with issues like drugs, gambling, or misconduct. Bryan's situation was different. It highlighted how the rise of social media and alternative tours are reshaping the boundaries of what players can do. The tour viewed the event as a violation of its competitive structure, while Bryan and many fans saw it as harmless content creation. The impact of the suspension goes beyond Bryan himself. It raises questions about how the PGA Tour will deal with players who build careers both on the course and online. Social media has become a huge part of modern sports, and golfers like the Bryan Bros, Rick Shields, and Good have shown there's a massive audience outside of traditional TV broadcasts. If players face punishment for stepping into that space when LIV or other groups are involved, it could set up more clashes in the future. For Wesley Bryan, the ban might not derail his livelihood. He still has his YouTube channel, sponsorships, and a loyal audience, but it complicates his competitive career. For the PGA Tour, the suspension signals that its hard stance against LIV applies even in gray areas, not just in big money tournaments. In the bigger picture, Bryan's suspension reflects a turning point. Golf is no longer confined to 72-hole stroke play events aired on cable TV. It's becoming part of the content economy, and governing bodies are being forced to decide where to draw the line. Wesley Bryan's case may end up being remembered less for the punishment itself and more for what it represents: the growing tension between traditional tours and the digital era of golf. Outro. Golf has always been a sport built on reputation, trust, and the idea that players call penalties on themselves. That's why bans in the professional game stand out so much. They aren't just punishments, they're reminders of how fragile a career can be when discipline, rules, or even personal choices slip. Thanks for watching, and click here to watch our next video.